last thing that I want to do is I want to give you a couple of bits that I think you can use on the negative when you are answering the argument that by participating in the debate, you're tacitly admitting that competition is superior to cooperation. I talked earlier about a professor and former debate coach at the University of Southern California by the name of Doug Enninger, and I still think you ought to go get that article and read it, because I think it's going to give you a lot of good ideas. But if you want someone you can quote that I think will probably make your judges sit up and take notice, what you need to do is you need to go get a book called God in the Dock, and it was published in 1970, and it is a collection of essays and letters by C.S. Lewis. And while you've got it checked out, you might as well sit down and read it, because a lot of those are really kind of a hoot. But one in particular, one talk that was included in that volume was entitled The Founding of the Oxford Socratic Club. And it's just some remarks that he made, and it's short. It's only 2 or 3 pages long. But along the way, he makes exactly the argument that Enninger made, that when you enter into argument, there is a cooperative element to it because you put yourself at risk. You allow the other person to question you, and it's a contract. There is something binding you together. Everybody comes under the rules of debate, and it is actually one of the more fair, one of the more agenda-free ways that people can meet one another and know that there's no manipulation involved. So I think that you can characterize that as something fundamentally competitive. If I were you, I would also go further to another communication scholar. This one's not all that well known, but his name is Chaim Perlman. Chaim Perlman. He wrote a book called The New Rhetoric. Now, The New Rhetoric is a big, thick book, and it is written in pretty dense academic speak. But if you can find kind of the key sections of it, you can find some bits and pieces that will help you make kind of an interesting little argument. The first thing about Chaim Perlman, I love to teach Chaim Perlman because in World War II, he was a philosophy professor in Belgium, which was taken over by the Nazis. And here's the cool part. He was writing The New Rhetoric during the day, being an academic, and we still study his book now in the classes that I teach. And at night, he was part of the underground resistance. How cool is that? Anyway, here's the move that he made. He said he tried as a logician to find a way to talk about values, which is what got me to thinking about the fit between this and Lincoln-Douglas debate. The fit between values, how could we talk about values in a way that was objective, in a way that did not involve human preferences and human subjectivity? And he spent 10 years on this project and ultimately was unable to do so. And what he said was the only tool human beings have to establish what their shared value premises are is rhetoric. And now here's the deal. Rhetoric has kind of a bad reputation. It's empty rhetoric, it's mere rhetoric, it's just eloquence, it's meant to deceive and dazzle people, and let's separate the rhetoric from the reality and so forth. And Chaim Perlman made an argument that that's actually pretty misguided, because he said the instances where we are most caught up in our rhetoric, you might think some of Barack Obama's campaign speeches that his followers were swooning over and his opponents were saying, yeah, let's see if that is actually practical, once you get into office. Perlman said it's on occasions like that that we lay the foundation for our values. It's on occasions like that when we speak collectively, drawn together as one group of people, endorsing the values that unite us. That is where we reach that consensus that we will later on need. So, what I think you can do is I think you can say, if your opponent says, well, debate is necessarily competitive, and we're necessarily trying to outdo one another, I think a move, an argumentative move that you may have to practice and hone a few times before you get it just right, but I think you can say, that would be fairly true of policy debate, because policy debate is about what shall we do. And that is necessarily partisan, and there are going to be interest groups who want to do different things. But this form of debate is kind of an odd creature. It's value debate. And we start every debate with value premises that everybody in the room can recognize and accept are important. We may not always agree what's the most important, but we start out with things like justice. And nobody's going to get very far if they stand up and say justice is completely unimportant. I don't care about justice at all. You'll notice that nobody ever gets up in a value debate and says, my value is causing pain to the innocent and helpless. Even though there are belief systems in the world where that is valued. If someone is a sadist or if someone practices black magic and believes that makes them powerful, those aren't shared values. Those aren't values that anyone who's a member of our culture, our society today is going to embrace. It would be almost impossible to have a value debate with a Nazi because the worldviews are so very different. So I think you could take what Perlman is saying and say that because we are having a value debate and because we embed our debate in value premises, we've already started off the debate. The foundation of the debate is cooperative. We've identified things that all of us can endorse, even if we prioritize them differently. So I think that gets you a little bit of ground. And I would add to that by talking about Socrates. And Socrates believed that when you talked about philosophy, when you talked about right and wrong in questions of value, the right method for doing it was the Socratic dialogue. It was questioning one another and refining statements and challenging ruthlessly, challenging constantly, and whittling away at error. Well, what does that sound like to you? It sounds to me like debate. And then you can get off into some of your other arguments about how the winner and the loser at the end of the debate is just an educational tool, and those same arguments are practiced by people in realms where there is no winner and no loser, and that's more excellent than the educational version, which is really only preparatory. One last thing I want to say. In yesterday's post to the vlog, which was about the team policy topic, I put a list of readings, and in that video, I made a case for why they needed to take several sections of the library and they needed to do a sweep, which is to say, take a ton of books off the shelf, anything that is in an entire subject category that's a recent book, and at least look at it. Check a ton of them out. Look through a lot of volumes of journals that are in that subject area and copy a lot of articles out of those journals, and then take it all back and process it for evidence. Now, obviously, Lincoln-Douglas debate is less evidence-intensive than team policy debate. It's not like you make arguments with no evidence, but the density of evidenced claims within the same speech times is much, much, much less. You take a few evidenced claims, and then you illustrate them, and then you apply them, and you do the whole thing in a more audience-friendly fashion instead of barraging them with evidenced claims. You know all of this already. I'm not telling you anything that's a surprise, I imagine. But the one thing I want to say is you really should not underestimate how important it is that you begin learning about the topic by consulting a lot of sources outside of your own head. The wrong way to start with any debate topic, whether it's team policy or whether it's Lincoln-Douglas, is to sit down with your blank sheet of paper and just start brainstorming with no foundation. So, what I have done in the vlog post today is I have put a list of books that are in the University of Oregon library, kind of a preliminary reading list, in addition to No Contest and True Competition that I recommended to you about a week ago. Here's the offer. Well, actually, here's the suggestion. What I think you ought to do is you need to go and, at this point in the season, you just need to be doing a lot of reading. Once you have filled your head with what other people have said, then it's time to start brainstorming what the applications are, what the angles are, what possible interpretation you might want to pursue, and start thinking 2 and 3 layers deep as to how you think these arguments will play out. But sort of on the tail end of that, I want to make an offer to anybody who is in Region 3, close enough to get to Oregon. The books that I've listed are all in the University of Oregon Library, and what I'm offering you is a classroom on the Northwest Christian University campus as sort of a staging ground. If you were to get your club together, and you could even get together with the team policy people and make it one trip, what we can do is we can bounce ideas. We can, at the end of the day, when you've collected all of your stuff, we can sort it. And sorting is not as it's not as no-brainer a process as you might think it is. There are a lot of decisions to be made along the way, and it's the kind of thing that it can really help for you to have some consultation. So, even though the last several emails, or the last several videos, I've put my email address and my phone number in repeatedly, I'll do it one more time. And if there's anybody in the area who wants to take me up on this offer, all you got to do is let me know so we can schedule something. My email address is dr.srader@gmail.com, and my phone number is 541-684-7216. The more I think about this topic, the more I think this is a topic that's got a lot of potential, and I hope that you are coming up with some good ideas and some good things to read and some good approaches, and I hope that this is going to be a really good year.